as a candidate, and in his first words, his executive, Rashawn Baker, talked about the need to improve Prince George's from worst to first when it comes to classroom achievement. Today, we'll talk with Superintendent William Hite Jr., and we'll take your calls.
From TBD, this is Newstalk with Bruce DePoit.
Hi, everybody. Welcome in on this Wednesday in the nation's capital. As always, it is great to have you here. It's also great to be able to welcome back to the program William Hite Jr., Dr. Hite, Superintendent of the Prince George's County School System. It is good to see you. Thanks very much for your time. It's great having you with us, as always.
Good morning. Good to be here, as always.
We have a lot to discuss, and we're going to, in a moment, take folks back to Monday and what new Prince George's County Executive Rashawn Baker said in his inaugural remarks. Of course, he talked a lot during the campaign about education. He talked about his own story in terms of struggles he had with reading and whatnot, and how he overcame them and went on to have, I think, by any measure, a pretty successful life. And he touched on education prominently in his first remarks as executive, and we're going to take, as I say, we're going to take folks back to Monday to give you a flavor of what he said and then get your reaction to it. But I do want to begin by asking you about the little girl who died in a school setting the other day. She fell ill, collapsed, I guess, at school, and then actually died at the hospital. Very tragic and sad. What can you tell us in terms of what happened and how folks who were on hand at the time responded?
Yeah, not more than what we have and what you just described. We had a very tragic incident at the school where this young lady attended the other day, and just at the beginning of a class, she complained about pretty severe headache. And we had a nurse at the school, as we do in most of our schools. The nurse began treating the young lady, who then collapsed. We administered CPR, called 911, called the child's parents, and the child was transported to the hospital, where she was later pronounced dead. And it's right now, in response to that, we're trying to provide as much support to the family as we possibly can, and also to the school and school staff and to the students who are attending. Is
there any reason to believe that anything that happened as part of the school day, or in any way, with students or what have you, that in any way connected to this, or do you think it was purely medical, if you will?
Not from all the reports we have. I think it was the first. It was the first part of the school day, and it's being investigated, however, by the Prince George's County Police Department, as all of these deaths that occur in schools. But as I indicated before, we're providing support to the family. We're participating and cooperating with the investigation. We do not think that it was anything that was school related. We think this was a result of some sort of medical problem that the young lady had. But our thoughts and prayers are with her family.
Very traumatic, of course, I would assume, for the girl's friends, her classmates, and others who were there during what was undoubtedly a traumatic and difficult time.
Absolutely, and that's why one of the first things we in these types of situations is distribute support to the school, and we have professionals who go to the school to provide counseling and support for, as I indicated before, the students. But we also have to think about employees who have emotional attachments to many of the young students that they teach. So I want to thank the staff at the school for what they do, but I also want to once again offer our prayers and condolences to the family.
Is there a nurse in every school?
Yes, we do have nurses in every school. We have actually registered nurses in every school. We have, and where we have vacancies, we either use contract nurses or we use nurses who are on call, the supervisors, to provide that support. And we think that that's a really important support service that we provide to all of the schools in Prince George's County.
Was this nurse able to get to the scene, the site where she was needed quickly? From what
Not only was she able to get to the scene, but she actually began administering CPR. And unfortunately, this ended tragically. But she was able to get to the scene, administer CPR, and give pretty critical medical information about the young lady to the paramedics.
Let's take you back now to Monday and to County Executive Rashern Baker's inaugural remarks. As I indicated, he stressed education during the campaign. If there were sort of two headlines, if you will, or two main messages, as at least I heard them from his inaugural remarks Monday. One was about, there was a talk about broad vision. He acknowledged the need to bring greater integrity to county government for all the reasons that I think are obvious at this point. And he talked about education. He talked about an educational third way, neither taking over the schools in the Adrian Fenty model or just saying, here's money, good luck. He described what he hopes to pursue as a third way for an executive to relate to the county school system. Let's take you back to Monday and Rashern Baker's remarks.
It is not enough for us to be satisfied with graduating from high school. We must demand, and we will demand, that our public schools provide our children with the type of education that makes them job ready and college ready when they graduate. It is a disservice to them to have one standard in high school and another standard for the rigors of life. We will provide more rigor and accountability in our school system. Now, I know when I say this, people think, is he trying to take over the school board? Hey, it's hard enough just trying to put a government together. Absolutely not. But I believe, and this administration will go down a third way. Not taking it over, but not sitting idly by and silent. The third way is to use every resource I have at my disposal and our government's disposal to work with our school board, to work with our superintendents, but to demand that there are standards there. That is the path that I choose. That is the path this government's going to go down. We will have a first-rate education system here.
Rashern Baker, County Executive Rashern Baker, Monday in his inaugural remarks before a crowd that braved the cold weather to come out and give him and the new council a warm welcome. You were nodding as you heard the executive speak. How did his words strike your ears?
Oh, it resonated with me, and as a matter of fact, it was very consistent to the message that I shared at the State of the School System address a couple of weeks ago, in which the county executive was present, and so resonated. It's very exciting having someone at that level of government talk about the importance of rigor in the classroom, and the importance of having all students exposed to a high quality teacher, and the importance of making sure he's doing everything within his power to provide us with the resources we need to sustain and continue the growth that we had in Prince George's County.
So his role, as you hope it evolves, is what? Cheerleader, and I don't mean that in a frivolous or kind of silly or light way, but I mean someone who uses the bully pulpit of his job to talk about the things that you just referred to a moment, and that he obviously just referred to, funding to the extent that he's able to, the county school system in a robust way, but not kind of getting in your business. Is that fair?
Well, and yes and no. So the other part of the other way of thinking about this is that having an individual at that level of government who's talking about the importance of ensuring that all students are exposed to more rigorous coursework, to ensure that students graduate from our system college and career ready. That's different than the conversations in the past. In those conversations, will we have enough money to fund the school-based budget? This is a much broader conversation, and this is the conversation about the knowledge and skills of students who graduate from our county and what those students should represent for us. We want our students to be successful when they move beyond us, either in a career or in an institution of higher education. And in order to do that, we have to begin those plans early on. And I think that the executive can show support through the budget process, but I also think he can show support through structures, policies, systems that are in place that will allow him to use his emphasis and his authority to help us in Annapolis, to help us as we talk to the citizenry of Prince George's County, and to help as we talk about recruiting the most high quality individuals to our county.
Recruiting and retaining, because
Recruiting
we know.
and retaining, no question about it, extremely important.
Because as we know, and by the way, let me give open the phone live. I'm remiss in giving out the number. The number here, for those of you watching in the 10 o'clock hour who have a comment for or a question for Prince George's School Superintendent William Hite, we'd love to have it. We want your voice in this discussion very much today. So the number here, 703-387-1020. We'll go to the phones as your questions and comments come in. Again, 703-387-1020. If you don't want to wait on the line, but you do have a question or comment, send it to me. I'll ask it for you. Newstalk@tbd.com. Newstalk@tbd.com. Going back to the retention piece, as we know, there are principals who've been lured away to a neighboring jurisdiction, better pay or what have you. And what's the first thing they do? I know a kick-ass biology teacher. I know a fourth grade teacher who sets the world on fire.
Absolutely.
And suddenly those people leave as well. You retain some of your best and brightest, and all manner of things are possible.
Absolutely. And what we know also is that for superintendents, four of my colleagues in the state of Maryland actually started their education in Prince George's County, their educational experience in Prince George's County. So we're losing and have lost in the past some high quality individuals. And so part of that, not just at the teacher level, but at the administrative ranks, as you've mentioned, we're in a very competitive market, a market with the likes of our neighboring county, Montgomery, Anne Arundel, with Baltimore County, with Howard County, with Fairfax, with Loudoun. And so we have to remain competitive, not only in terms of salary, but in terms of working conditions and what we're asking individuals to do and how we're asking them to be individuals that we raise or we consider very professional, we incentivize, and that we support.
I need to go to break in a moment, but
Sure.
I remember, I think it was Iris Metz who not complained publicly, but acknowledged that she was fighting a very uphill battle in terms of retention because of pay and other issues. Briefly, kind of the summary, bottom line, how are things right now for you?
We've become competitive. However, over the past 3 years, when we've been cutting in excess of $100 million each year for the past 3 years, we've had to freeze salaries. And that competition now is where we were competitive before. It's beginning to become a concern. And we understand the contract that was just approved in Baltimore City. We know about the new contract approved in the district. And so we have to remain competitive. And you do not remain competitive when every year you're cutting money out of our budget that goes to pay teachers, that goes to keep class sizes at a certain rate, and goes to really making sure everyone is as effective as they possibly can be.
Talking with Prince George's School Superintendent Dr. William Hite. A break, back with more News Talk right after this. Thanks for staying with us here on TBD. I'm Bruce DePoit alongside Prince George's County School Superintendent William Hite Jr. Phone lines open for your questions and comments for him. We're talking about educational achievement in Prince George's County and beyond. We'd love to have you join us. As always, our number is 703-387-1020. You can send emails to newstalk@tbd.com. We have an email that we'll go to momentarily. Very good question about parental involvement. So what kinds of things are you working on right now to boost educational achievement, to boost classroom learning day to day throughout the large system that you oversee?
So one of the things that I think that is extremely important is one of the things that the county executive talked about, and that is exposing more students to more rigorous coursework and content. We have something now across the country, it's called the Common Core, and there are new standards that will be adopted by states. And inside of these standards is asking students to go more deeper with more breadth in terms of the content knowledge with respect to what they write, how they analyze facts, how they do mathematics, and how they apply literacy across several content areas. That will require us to, number one, make access available to all students in many of our more rigorous courses like advanced placement, international baccalaureate, but it's also really important to expose students to opportunities to apply those skills at career and technical types of vocations and experiences. But we want students to finish with something, not just have the experience, but leave with a certification in one of those respected areas so that they're able to do something after high school in their area where they receive some training. The second part is really ensuring that we're developing, building, and supporting the capacity of our individuals who are in front of students. So I think it's extremely important to talk about this notion of ensuring that every single student in Prince George's County is exposed to a high quality, highly effective teacher. And so what does that mean? That means that we have to equip those teachers with the content knowledge, the skills, and all of the strategies to make sure that they're able to engage their students in activities that allow their students to think critically, to problem solve, to work as a member of a team. So those are the two primary factors that we're really doing to boost student achievement. The final piece is really around accountability. At every single level in our organization, it's really important for us to have data available, number one, but number two, to identify that data, to use those data to identify root causes and symptoms of much greater problems. And doing that on a frequent enough basis so that it informs us of our actions from that point, so that we can make the necessary adjustments to make sure we're still heading towards our target.
How did you view the controversy that erupted in the district over someone who obviously has become a national symbol for educational reform, famous for her clashes with the unions, etc., now former DC Schools Chancellor Michelle Rhee? She was able to attract big money from philanthropic organizations and foundations with the notion of teachers extraordinary by our customary standards salaries if they were hitting the ball out of the park on a consistent basis, and really pushing out, some would say unfairly so, her critics say appropriately so, her supporters say appropriately so, teachers who weren't measuring up. How did you view all of that, and you know, sort of, how do you take some of the good without what was clearly a divisive and difficult arrangement that ended up with her boss losing his primary and her feeling like she no longer had a future in the system?
Yeah, and I can't speak to the contextual part of that, which is the micro politics that was inside of all of those things that occurred. But one thing I can speak to is the fact what she was trying to do with respect to reform. And Chancellor Rhee, or former Chancellor Rhee, was really doing things that were reform-minded with respect to the teacher contract, and how and what to incentivize, and making sure that students were at the center of that. In Prince George's County, we think that that is important as well. It's one of the reasons we implemented a pay-for-performance model, but we did that really working in concert and in collaboration with the leadership from our teachers union. As a matter of fact, our new evaluation model was developed in collaboration and in support with our union. They sat with us from the very beginning to the very end, and they are the ones who push this notion of having a new evaluation that really allows teachers to receive feedback that they can use in their classroom the next day. So I think that collaboration becomes a very important part of that. But I think also
what I hear you saying is that the traditional, paradigm that often gets bandied about of superintendent versus union or system versus labor may be a feature of some school districts, but it need not be so in every case, and probably isn't best to have in any event.
And one of the things that's so important about that comment, Bruce, is that our teachers want to make sure that they have the skills they need. Our teachers also want to make sure that all of their colleagues are doing the right things for students within their schools.
Because if you're a fourth grade teacher, you inherit the people who are in third grade now, and you want them at level or beyond.
No question about it. Or if you're all third grade teachers and there's one class on the third grade wing that's creating problems for everyone, then that impacts the whole third grade. And so part of this is making sure that, number one, we all agree on the outcomes and talk about how do we get to those outcomes. But we have to think about this from the perspective of reform, because that's where the country and the president and the educational secretary is driving us.
The phone line's open at 703-387-1020. We'll go to the phones momentarily. I have an open line. If you'd like to grab it with your question or comment for Dr. Hite, again, 703-387-1020. Won't keep you waiting. We'll get to you pretty much right away. Let's go to the email that we received from Ty in Landover Hills. You can email me directly at newstalk@tbd.com. So here it is. I recently went to an awards ceremony for a student that attends high school in Prince George's County, and out of all the children who received awards, only 3 parents were there. How does the system plan to get more parents involved with the education of their children? Dr. Hite?
Yeah, that's a great question. And part of this is not a Board of Education thing to motivate parents to come out in support of students. However, we have to talk about why that's so important and what we want parents to do in order to help support their children. I was recently participating in an interview, and people were talking about parent conferences and the notion of parent conferences, and if we're doing things to really involve more parents in the parent conference day. And my answer to that question was no. What we want to do is increase the number of conferences, not necessarily at one given time or 2 times during the year, but conferences can be done other ways, via email, it can be done on phone, it can be done with text messages, and so
Skype.
With Skype, no question about it. And so there are other ways for us to really interact and engage parents. However, it is extremely important that when we're recognizing our young people, that we get individuals there to support those young people. And I agree with the individual who sent the email. It's really important that parents help us communicate that message, that it is unacceptable if we're acknowledging students in their county that we don't have more parents showing their support for that in a program as the email just described.
I have 75 questions. I'm not going to be able to get to all the things I want to talk with you about today, but you just planted a seed that I hadn't thought of. We're in a period, or we may have come out of a period. You mentioned award. There's this facet of our society that believes that, and Michelle Reeves talked about this, that every kid should get a ribbon or a trophy, even if they're mediocre. She made the comment about her own kids, that they suck at soccer, sorry, but they're not very good at soccer. And but to look at their bedroom wall, you'd think she was raising the next Mia Hamm. Do you say, let's reward excellence and try to bring everyone up to a high level, or is there some kind of a self-esteem piece that is valuable in giving a trophy to every kid, essentially? I'm exaggerating, but you get the point.
Yeah, but the trophy doesn't have to be that little metal statue on a wood frame. The trophy could be, I'm glad to see you today. Or the trophy could be, how was your weekend? Or did you have problems with your homework? The trophy could be those relationships that we establish with every student on a day-to-day basis that makes that student feel valued. No, I'm an old football person. I'm not for everybody receiving rewards, because I think then that exaggerates individuals' abilities as they have to go out into a competitive market in a competitive world to earn a living. But I do think that our trophies for our young people are the relationships that we establish, the advocacy that they get from us, and them understanding that we absolutely care about them being smarter when they leave us than when they arrived with us.
Does Prince George's have a shorter school day than other systems, and are you interested in, and would it even be possible to extend the day?
Yes, we do have the shortest school day for elementary and middle. It is 6 hours and 15 minutes, and I think the state average is around 7 or just under 7. And one of the things that we have talked about several years ago was really the cost to that's associated with expanding the school day.
By transportation?
By transportation. We've extended the day for 4 of our turnaround schools. We were fortunate enough to get a turnaround grant, so we've extended the school. We also plan to extend the year at those 4 places. My dissertation was actually on extending the school year, so I am a big proponent of extending the time that we have with their young people.
How long would summer be in? When you're king and you can wave your wand, how long is the school year?
Well, I think that it's...
If kings have wands, I think that makes the metaphor there. I'm sorry.
So, but I think that one of the things that we could do is, it's really, this notion of extending time is also shortening the time where regression is allowed to occur. So we have students who have 9 to 10 weeks off in the summer. There's a great deal of regression that occurs inside of that time. And so I think there are ways to increase or use that time differently, where we are having shorter spans of breaks so that there's less regression during those times. But to your point directly, I think that we should have at least another hour of the school day that would allow us to do things like implement more world languages, have more time that we can do lab-based sciences, and more time to implement PE, because we want more students exposed to activities. So those are some things that I would like to see inside of the county.
We got about a minute left. What's one thing that, and I know, by the way, that the executive, you and the executive had lunch, I believe it was the day after he won
Absolutely.
the primary, so
Absolutely.
the day after we essentially knew that he was going to lead the county for the next 4 years, he said, Dr. Hite, you and I, would you like to have lunch? I want to make, this is symbolically and in other ways something I really want to do as a first act. If he comes to you now and says, as a concrete thing, what can we do with you, for you, to get Prince George's out of a situation where we're 23rd out of 24 in virtually every category? What's that thing? Budget piece or further engagement of the community? What is it? Or blocking some bad idea that might, or difficult, you know what I'm saying, a challenging move that might come out of Annapolis. What is that thing that is your ask of him?
So a couple of things we've already done. And part of it is, so on his, a couple of weeks ago, the new county executive sat down with the Board of Education and really talked about this notion of focus on what's most important. And what's most important is the education and the educational outcomes of the students in Prince George's County. So using his ability to communicate that importance, talking about how, as a county, we should have high expectations for what our students are exposed to in the county and what we think they should finish with. And then the most important thing is really finding ways to support education financially and fiscally in these tough economic times. It's really important to understand that we had to spend money to make sure that we were ensuring that more students were achieving, and when we lose money, then we put all of those things at risk.
After me to wrap up, and understandably so, but are there any schools in the county right now that are in red alert status in terms of the state, or No Child Left Behind, or because in the past we've heard about takeover by the state and reconstitution? Are there any schools where alarm bells are ringing or about to ring?
Yeah, we just turned around 4 schools this past year, 4 of our middle schools. We already have an idea of schools that in the future, if we get to turn around more schools, we're going to focus on those. Inside of our secondary school reform, we're also targeting some of our secondary schools with low performance. So we do have schools that are red alert status, if you will, and those schools are not performing as they should be, and we will be looking to either turn those schools around or reform the programs that are in those schools today.
Dr. William Hite, Superintendent of Schools in Prince George's County, it's always wonderful having you here. Please come back and be with us again very soon.
Always a pleasure.
Superintendent William Hite joining us today on this Wednesday. We'll pause here, we'll come back, we'll update headlines and the forecast, and then Roger Berliner joins us. Don't go away.